Welcome to another episode of Doors of the Universe podcast. This episode is going to be a little bit different than some of the other episodes I've done. I have done one episode previous to this on a more biographical episode, and that was on Harold Hardrada, which if you haven't listen to that episode, I highly recommend it. It was a very fun one to do and to learn about Harold and his history as a Viking. But today is a little more recent. Today's episode is on Pat Tillman. Some of you may know that name, some of you may not. Pat Tillman was an NFL player who became a U.S. Army Ranger after 9/11. This one is going to be a lot of me just reading. I don't want to mess up information in this. I feel like it's best to probably just hop right in the episode and get going on that. When I think of what a classic definition of an American poster child is defined as, Pat Tillman is someone that comes to mind. Pat was a vision of what I grew up believing what Americans were supposed to be. We excelled in athleticism, had strong patriotism in our country, and believed in doing what was right because it was for the greater good. I'm 40 now, and I would say my viewpoints have changed quite drastically as to what I define as an ideal American. After reading Pat's story, I believe that I would still define Pat Tillman as what an ideal American should be. I wanted to do this episode because I feel like there are a lot of people that don't know Pat Tillman's story or have forgotten about it, like myself, and it is one that deserves to be told. I asked a friend of mine who served in the Marines if they knew who Pat Tillman was. They're the same age as me, and they didn't know who he was. I'll be completely honest, I barely remember the story myself until I came across a post on social media on the anniversary of his death, and I added Pat Tillman to the Wheel of Destiny with all my possible podcast topics. He was the most recent topic that did come up on this, which I think this is where we're at as a country, as a people, as Americans. I think it's good. It's a good time to remember Pat Tillman. When I started doing the research for this episode and looking more into Pat Tillman, research about him, his untimely and initially covered up death, I realized I did remember the story, but not nearly as in depth of details as I came across while doing this research. I do need to make clear this episode does deal with some topics that are more geared towards a mature audience, so I would recommend listening with that in mind. But yeah, Pat Tillman. Pat Tillman was born on November 6, 1976 in San Jose, California, the son of Mary Spalding and Patrick Kevin Tillman. He was the oldest of three sons, with Kevin and Richard as the other two. Tillman played competitive football. He was very close to his family and high school friends. Pat was a caring and protective brother and a natural leader with a tendency to push limits in life, the classroom, and on the field. He repeatedly mentioned in his personal journals during wartime service that he drew strength from and deeply valued his closest friendships, parents, wife, and family. Tillman was very committed to his high school sweetheart, Marie Ugenti, whom he married shortly after his enlistment in the Army. He also was very close with his brother Kevin, who enlisted with and served alongside him. Pat went to Bret Hart Middle School and helped lead Leland High School to the Central Coast Division I football championship. His challenger mentality would become his signature. His diligence and relentless curiosity amazed almost everyone he came into contact with. Tillman did not always play football. In his freshman year of high school, he was catcher for his baseball team, but he did not make the varsity team. In his sophomore year, he decided to concentrate on football. which was a good decision for Pat because Tillman went on to Arizona State University on a football scholarship. He started his college career as a linebacker for Arizona State University in 1994 when he secured the last remaining scholarship for the team. Tillman excelled as a linebacker at Arizona State, despite being relatively small for the position at 5'11". Arizona State University recognized Pat's potential both in classroom and on field with a scholarship to play for the Sun Devils. What Pat lacked in physical size, he more than made up for in intensity as linebacker. He led ASU to the 1997 Rose Bowl after an undefeated season, earned 3 consecutive selections to the Pac-10 All-Academic Football Team, a first-team academic All-American honor, as well as the NCAA's postgraduate scholarship for academic and athletic excellence. Between games, Pat earned a BS in marketing, graduating summa cum laude from ASU's prestigious W.P. Carey School of Business in 3.5 years with a 3.85 GPA. Pat gained admiration and high regards from his professors, coaches, and fans alike. As a junior, he helped his team go undefeated that season, as well as helping them make it to the Rose Bowl that year. In 1997, he was voted the Pac-10 Defensive Player of the Year. In the same year, Tillman was also named Arizona State's MVP. He also earned many academic awards, including the Clyde B. Smith Academic Award in 1996 and 97, the Sporting News Honda Scholar Athlete of the Year in 1997, and the 1998 Sun Angels Student Athlete of the Year. He was inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame in 2010, and was also posthumously inducted into Arizona Sports Hall of Fame in 2018. In the 1998 NFL Draft, Tillman was selected as a 226th pick by the Arizona Cardinals and given a signing bonus of just $21,000. That was equivalent to $40,512 in 2024. Tillman moved over to play the safety position in the NFL and started 10 of 16 games in his rookie season. At one point in his NFL career, Tillman turned down a 5-year, $9 million contract offer from the St. Louis Rams out of loyalty to the Cardinals. And from what I've read and heard in podcasts I listened to about Pat Tillman, this was just the type of person he was. He was committed, loyal, a hard worker, and a fierce competitor. Sports Illustrated football writer Paul Zimmerman, sometimes known as Dr. Z, named Tillman to his 2000 NFL All-Pro team. Tillman finished his career with the totals of 340 tackles, 2.5 sacks, 3 interceptions for 37 yards, 3 forced fumbles, 15 pass deflections, and 3 fumble recoveries in 60 career games. In addition, he also had 1 rush attempt for 4 yards and returned 3 kickoffs for 33 yards. Pat's NFL success did not go to his head or break his principles. He still drove to games in the same beat-up truck he had in college. He had no cell phone. He chose to read voraciously and develop, debate, and discuss his ideas with eager listeners, family, and friends. He made your passion his passion. Tillman's agent, Frank Bauer, has called him a deep and clear thinker who never valued material things. In the off-season, he challenged himself physically with marathons and half-Ironman triathlons while pursuing a master's degree in history from his alma mater. He volunteered with Boys and Girls Clubs, the March of Dimes, and read and talked to students in schools across the Phoenix Valley. So in case you didn't pick that up from that section, Pat Tillman was very smart. He was well educated, and just a great athlete. He was somebody that I don't remember hearing or reading anything negative about him from other athletes or from team members, coaches, anything like that. Pat was just a good guy that was excelled at sports. He was well read. I do remember hearing that one podcast. He was well read and a free thinker. And that brings us to what made Pat join the military. 9/11 comes around, and everyone, I particularly remember 9/11 when it happened. I was in school. The first plane hit one of the World Trade Center towers. Everybody assumed it was an accident, but it was still something that was being covered on the news. And I remember our teachers rolling in a TV so we could see the news of what was going on. And then shortly after that, the second plane hit the second tower. And everybody realizes this is no accident. We're under attack. And yeah. I remember it was a weird feeling because the last time, obviously, we were attacked on American soil was Pearl Harbor. So years, 41, so about 40 years before I was born. So I had no recollection of this feeling of what it feels like to be attacked in the U.S. What I do remember is it was a period where it seemed to unite us more as a country. It seemed like you cared a little more for your neighbor, cared a little more for other Americans in general. It was as terrible as it was, and as how many people died in it, it really, you felt a more united country. Probably the most united this country's ever been, and since I've been alive, it felt like we were one country against this, all experiencing this at the same time. But yeah, the day after the attacks of September 11th, Pat told a reporter, "At times like this, you got to stop and think about just how good we have it, what kind of system we live in, and the freedoms we are allowed. A lot of my family has gone and fought in wars, and I really haven't done a damn thing." In the spring of 2002, Pat married his high school love, Marie, and upon his return from their honeymoon in May, 8 months after the September 11th attacks, announced to the Cardinals after completing the 15 remaining games of 2001 season which followed the attacks, Tillman turned down a contract offer of $3.6 million, $6 million in 2024 dollars, over 3 years from the Cardinals. He had decided to place his NFL career on hold to enlist in the U.S. Army with his brother Kevin. The decision shocked many and garnered national media attention despite his refusal to speak publicly about the choice. This is, again, someone who felt the need to step in and do something for what he felt was the greater good at that time. He turned down a $3.6 million contract with the Cardinals to join the Army. Yeah. Tillman and his brother Kevin, who was also a professional sports player and left their career with the Anaheim Angels, both enlisted on May 31st, 2002. In September 2002, they completed basic training together. The two brothers completed the Ranger Assessment and Selection Program in late 2002 and were assigned to the 2nd Ranger Battalion in Fort Lewis, Washington. Tillman resided in University Place with his wife before being deployed to Iraq. After participating in the initial invasion of Iraq as part of Operation Iraqi Freedom, in September 2003, he entered Ranger School at Fort Benning, Georgia. He graduated on November 28, 2003, and to my understanding, Tillman was not happy about this being his first deployment. He did not want to go to Iraq. He joined because he wanted to join the fight in Afghanistan. Pat got to Iraq and felt they shouldn't be there and were fighting in Iraq for the wrong reasons. The Washington Post reported that prior to his death, Tillman called the invasion and occupation of Iraq fucking illegal. At the time, another Army member who had made national news was Private Jessica Lynch. Pat Tillman's first mission as an elite Army Ranger in Iraq was the rescue of Private Jessica Lynch. And we found this was revealed by John Krakauer's book, Where Men Win Glory, The Odyssey of Pat Tillman. Although Tillman played only a bit part in Lynch's rescue, he quickly concluded that the mission had motives beyond military strategy. "We leave tomorrow," Tillman wrote in a series of journal entries. "This mission will be a POW rescue, a woman named Jessica Lynch. As awful as I feel for the fears she must face and admire the courage I'm sure she's showing, I do believe this is to be a big public relations stunt. Do not mistake me. I wish everyone in trouble to be rescued, but sending this many folks for a single low-ranking soldier screams of media blitz." Lynch had been falsely portrayed by Pentagon officials as a heroic soldier who went down firing her rifle at her Iraqi captors, when in truth she later testified that she had never fired a shot and was captured after her vehicle had crashed. Just over a year later, many of the same Bush administration officials and military commanders would scheme to transform Tillman's own death by friendly fire in Afghanistan into a similarly disingenuous tale of battlefield valor. Tillman was one of the most potent and misused symbols of the post-9/11 patriotism in America. As the most famous American soldier in the newly launched War on Terror, Tillman had received a personal note of congratulations from Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld after he enlisted. The former Arizona Cardinals hitman was highly suspicious of being used by his superiors to market a war about which he was openly ambivalent, according to Krakauer's book. When the Army asked Tillman to do media interviews, he refused. And soon after arriving in Iraq as an Army Ranger, he shared his wariness with a friend. "When we were in Baghdad, our cots were next to each other," Specialist Jade Lane told Krakauer. "Pat and I used to talk at night before we'd rack out. I don't know how the conversation got brought up, but one night he said that he was afraid that if something happened to him, they would parade him through the streets. And those were his exact words. I don't want them to parade me through the streets." It just burned into my brain, him saying that. Under the special instructions section of a standard Army form, Tillman had scrawled in block letters, "I do not want the military having any direct involvement in my funeral." Krakauer supplemented months of frontline reporting from Iraq and Afghanistan in 2006 and 2007 and scores of military documents with the exclusive access to Tillman's personal journals and interviews with Tillman's family, teammates and coaches, fellow soldiers, and even neighbors on the block where his mother lived. The official misrepresentations in both the Lynch rescue and the Tillman friendly fire death came to represent some of the worst aspects of a highly controversial war in Iraq. It would be several years before both Lynch and Tillman's families would find voice together at a hearing on Capitol Hill called Misleading Information from the Battlefield. So, after his term in Iraq, Tillman was subsequently deployed to Afghanistan and posted at Forward Operating Base Salerno. On April 22, 2004, he was initially reported to have been killed by enemy combatants. An Afghan militia force allied soldier, Syed Farad, was also killed in the action. Tillman's platoon leader, First Lieutenant David Outlaut, and his radio telephone operator, RTO, 19-year-old Jade Lane, were wounded in the incident. The Army initially claimed that Tillman and his unit were attacked in an apparent ambush on the road outside the village of Spira, about 25 miles, 40 kilometers, southwest of Khost, Khost, near the Pakistan border. It was not until after his burial that investigations by the Department of Defense and U.S. Congress were launched, eventually ruling his death as having come by friendly fire. An investigation by the U.S. Army Criminal Investigation Division, CID, concluded that Tillman and the Afghan militia soldier were killed by friendly fire when one part of his platoon fired upon the other in confusion after nearby gunfire was mistakenly believed to be from enemy combatants. The CID report summary, dated March 19, 2007, stated that during their movement through the Canyon Road, Serial 2, Tillman's platoon had to be split up because of a broken HMMWV, high mobility, multipurpose wheeled vehicle. These parts were called Serial 1 and Serial 2, was ambushed and became engaged in a running gun battle with enemy combatants. Serial 1, Tillman's portion of the platoon, had just passed through the same canyon without incident and were approximately 1 kilometer ahead of Serial 2. Upon hearing explosions, gunfire, and sporadic radio communication from Serial 2, Serial 1 dismounted their vehicles and moved on foot to a more advantageous position to provide overwatch and fire support for Serial 2's movement out of the ambush. Upon exiting the gorge, and despite attempts by Serial 1 to signal a friendly position, occupants of the lead vehicle of Serial 2 opened fire on Tillman's position, where he was fatally shot. The Army Special Operations Command initially claimed that there was an exchange with hostile forces. After a lengthy investigation conducted by Brigadier General Gary M. Jones, the U.S. Department of Defense concluded that both the Afghan militia soldiers and Tillman's death were due to friendly fire aggravated by the intensity of the firefight. Tillman's mother testified before Congress, stating, "The deception surrounding this case was an insult to the family, but more importantly, its primary purpose was to deceive a whole nation." A report described in the Washington Post on May 4, 2005, prepared at the request of Tillman's family by Brigadier General Gary M. Jones, revealed that in the days immediately following Tillman's death, Army investigators were aware that Tillman had been killed by friendly fire, shot 3 times in the head at less than 10 yards away, according to Army doctors. Jones reported that senior Army commanders, including General John Abizaid, knew of this fact within days of the shooting, but nevertheless approved the awarding of the Silver Star, Purple Heart, a posthumous promotion to the rank of corporal. Lieutenant General Stanley McChrystal approved the Silver Star's citation on April 28, 2004, which gave a detailed account of Tillman's death, including the phrase, "in the line of devastating enemy fire." But the next day, he sent a P4 confidential memo warning senior government members that Tillman might actually have been killed in friendly fire. Senior commanders within the U.S. Central Command, including former commander of the United States Central Command, CENTCOM, General John Abizaid, were notified by the P4 memo, which described Tillman's highly possible fratricide, 4 days before Tillman's nationally televised memorial service, during which he was lauded as a war hero for dying while engaging the enemy. Jones reported that members of Tillman's unit burned his body armor and uniform in an apparent attempt to hide the fact that he was killed in friendly fire. His notebook, in which, according to author John Krakauer, Tillman had recorded some of his thoughts on Afghanistan, was also burned. A blatant violation of protocol. Several soldiers were punished for their actions by being removed from the United States Army Rangers. Jones believed that Tillman should retain his medals and promotion, since, according to Jones, he intended to engage the enemy and behaved heroically. So we can stop there just to say, normally when a soldier dies, all their possessions get sent back to the family. That includes clothing, journals. Their possessions go back. Even if they're killed in the line of fire, the uniform goes back to the family. So this burning of everything was not typical protocol. But yeah, there hasn't been a good explanation as to why they burned all of his items. But yeah, it did result in several soldiers were removed from the United States Army Rangers due to this. Which, it just makes you think, what I wish, I would love to know what was in the journals that got burned. That would be something I would love to read. I feel like Pat Tillman, especially being somebody who was so smart, so well educated, his writings probably would have changed. Definitely had the possibility of changing the views of a country, or at least his generation. Tillman's family was not informed of the finding that he was killed by friendly fire until weeks after his memorial service, although at least some senior Army officers knew of the fact prior to the service. According to Krakauer, in his book Where Men Win Glory, the extensive cover-up that followed Tillman's death included the military's order of Tillman's comrades to lie to his family at the funeral. Tillman's parents have sharply criticized the Army's handling of the incident. Tillman's mother believed that the lie was to cover their image, while Tillman's father believed that the Army purposefully interfered in the investigation because of the effect it could have on their recruiting efforts. After it happened, all the people in positions of authority went out of their way to script this. They purposely interfered with the investigation. They covered it up. I think they thought that they could control it, and they realized that their recruiting efforts were going to go to hell in a handbasket if the truth about his death got out. They blew up their poster boy. He also blamed high-ranking Army officers for presenting outright lies to Tillman's family and to the public. On March 4, 2006, the U.S. Defense Department Inspector General directed the Army to open a criminal investigation of Tillman's death. The Army's Criminal Investigative Division was to determine whether Tillman's death was the result of negligent homicide. On March 26, 2007, the Pentagon released a report on the events surrounding Tillman's death and cover-up. The report reads in part, "We emphasize that all investigators established the basic facts of Corporal Tillman's death, that it was caused by friendly fire, that the occupants of one vehicle in Corporal Tillman's platoon were responsible, and that circumstances on the ground caused those occupants to misidentify friendly forces as hostile. None of the investigations suggested that Corporal Tillman's death was anything other than accidental. Our review, as well as the investigation recently completed by Army CID, obtained no evidence contrary to those key findings." Tillman's brother, Kevin, testified before the United States House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform that the deception surrounding this Tillman case was an insult to the family, but more importantly, its primary purpose was to deceive a whole nation. We say these things with disappointment and sadness for our country. Once again, we have been used as props in a Pentagon public relations exercise. After Kevin's testimony, Pete Guerin, acting Secretary of the Army, stated to reporters, "We as an Army failed in our duty to the Tillman family, the duty we owe to all the families of our fallen soldiers, give them the truth, the best we know it, as fast as we can." Tillman's notebook diary was never returned to his family, and its whereabouts are not publicly known. One investigation of the autopsy report and photographs by two forensic pathologists in November 2006 concluded that Tillman was most likely killed as a result of fire from an M249 light machine gun. The M249 uses the same ammunition as the M16 rifle and M4 carbine, but is capable of higher rates of fire. This would allow a competent user to place 3 bullets within a several-inch target from 40 to 50 yards away, even from a moving vehicle. On July 26, 2007, Chris Matthews reported on Hardball that Tillman's death may have been a case of deliberate murder by Tillman's fellow soldiers, specifically that the bullet holes were tight and neat, suggesting a shot at close range. Matthews based this speculation on a report from the doctors who examined Tillman's body. The following day, the Associated Press reported that a doctor who examined Tillman's body after his death wrote, "The medical evidence did not match up with the scenario as described," also noting that the wound entrances appear as though he had been shot with an M16 rifle from fewer than 10 yards away. A possible motive was not identified. When officers and soldiers were asked during criminal investigation, they said they were certain that the shooting was accidental. According to one of his fellow soldiers, Tillman was popular among his fellow soldiers and had no enemies. In addition, in response to a Freedom Information Act request filed by Associated Press, the Defense Department released 2,300 pages of documents which were reported to indicate there has never been evidence of enemy fire found on the scene, and no member of Tillman's groups had been hit by enemy fire. The 3-star general, who withheld details of Tillman's death and his parents for a number of months, told investigators approximately 70 times that he had a bad memory and could not recall the details of his actions. Army attorneys sent each other congratulatory emails for keeping criminal investigators at bay as the Army conducted an internal friendly fire investigation that resulted in administrative or non-criminal punishments. Army doctors told the investigators that Tillman's wounds suggested murder because the medical evidence did not match up with the scenario as described. On April 24, 2007, that is just, it's really hard to read. It's just the grossness of the amount of covering each other and trying to cover up this as best as possible. Honestly makes me sick to my stomach. It just makes my stomach drop. Like, I don't. Let's do one more quick read through, because I mean this is so important. There's 2,300 pages of documents which were reported from the Defense Department to the Associated Press, and the 4 top things drawn from those 2,300 pages. There's never been evidence of enemy fire found on the scene, and no members of Tillman's group had been hit by enemy fire. The 3-star general, who withheld details of Tillman's death from his parents for a number of months, told investigators approximately 70 times over a period of months that he had a bad memory and could not recall details of his actions. I think this is the grossest. Army attorneys sent each other congratulatory emails for keeping criminal investigators at bay as the Army conducted an internal friendly fire investigation that resulted in administrative or non-criminal punishments. And then finally, Army doctors told the investigators that Tillman's wounds suggested murder because the medical evidence did not match up with the scenario as described. So you've got the Army doctors coming out and saying that this is probably murder because it's not matching up with what we're told is happening at the scene. We're burning his uniform. We're burning his journal, which who knows? Who knows what was in that journal? But yeah, completely going outside of normal protocol and burning these things. Which, any other situation, everything gets sent back. On April 24th, 2007, Specialist Brian O'Neill, the last soldier known to see Pat Tillman alive, testified before the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform that he was warned by superiors not to divulge information that a fellow soldier killed Tillman, especially to the Tillman family. Later, Pat Tillman's brother, Kevin Tillman, who was also in the convoy traveling behind his brother at the time of the 2004 incident in Afghanistan but did not witness it, testified that the military tried to spin his brother's death to deflect attention from emerging failings in the Afghan war. On July 13, 2007, Henry Waxman and Tom Davis, the leading members of the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, revealed that the Bush administration and the Pentagon had withheld key documents relating to Tillman's death and denied any new document release requests from Congress, citing executive privilege. On August 13, 2007, the Associated Press reported that, on behalf of Vote Vets, 20 U.S. military veterans who fought in Iraq and Afghanistan asked the NFL Commissioner, Roger Goodell, to help secure the release of all documents relating to the death of Pat Tillman. I'm not sure. It's confusing to me how they think Roger Goodell, how they think the NFL Commissioner is going to help secure the release of all documents. On July 14, 2008, the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform released a proposed report titled Misleading Information from the Battlefield, the Tillman and Lynch Episodes. The committee stated that its investigation was frustrated by a near universal lack of recall among senior officials at the White House and the military. It concluded the pervasive lack of recollection and absence of specific information makes it impossible for the committee to assign responsibility for the misinformation in Specialist Tillman's and Private Lynch's cases. It is clear, however, that the Defense Department did not meet its most basic obligations in sharing accurate information with the families and with the American public. So that is all the information I have on Pat Tillman's death. A couple other episodes I listened to a podcast talking about Pat Tillman, just related to how gross it was how the U.S. government used Pat Tillman, and we're expecting to hope Pat Tillman would be this poster child helping them with recruiting for the Army after 9/11. But in reality, Pat Tillman had his own views on the war. He felt it was wrong for them to be in Iraq. Tillman said Iraq was fucking illegal. Any thoughts Pat had were no longer accessible because his notebook had been burned with his thoughts on Afghanistan, but I have this feeling inside that they were similar to the thoughts that he had on Iraq. But Pat Tillman definitely left a legacy. After Pat's death, family and friends of Tillman, including his widow, Marie Tillman, established the Pat Tillman Foundation to carry forward Tillman's legacy by inspiring and supporting those striving for positive change in themselves and the world. Marie would serve as executive director and then chair of the board. The Pat Tillman Foundation offers scholarships for veterans and military spouses, continuing his mission of service and education. There's a highway bypass around the Hoover Dam, has a bridge bearing Tillman's name, completed in October 2010. The Mike O'Callahan Pat Tillman Memorial Bridge spans the Colorado River between Nevada and Arizona. Lincoln Law School of San Jose has established the Pat Tillman Scholarship in honor of Tillman. Tillman's father earned his Juris Doctor from Lincoln in 1983. On Sunday, September 19, 2004, all teams of the NFL wore a memorial decal on their helmets in honor of Tillman. The Arizona Cardinals continue to wear this decal throughout the 2004 season. Former Cardinals quarterback Jake Plummer requested to also wear the decal for the entire season, but the NFL turned him down, saying his helmet would not be uniform with the rest of the Denver Broncos. Plummer later grew a full beard and his hair long in honor of Tillman, who had such a style in the NFL before cutting his hair and shaving his beard off to fit military uniform guidelines. The Cardinals retired his number 40, and Arizona State did the same for the number 42 he wore with the Sun Devils. The Cardinals have named the plaza surrounding their State Farm Stadium in Glendale Pat Tillman Freedom Plaza. Later, on November 12, 2006, during a Cardinals game versus the Cowboys, a bronze statue was revealed in his honor. ASU also named the football locker room entryway to Sun Devil Stadium the Pat Tillman Memorial Tunnel and made a PT-42 patch that they place on the neck of their uniforms as a permanent feature. In 2011, Pat Tillman Veterans Center in the lower level of the Memorial Union opened on the Tempe campus. Before the 2013 season, the Tillman Tunnel was renovated with new graphics and signage. Double doors separated the locker room from the tunnel, and a television with a sound system plays Tillman's career highlights. The gate, which opens to the field, features an image of Pat Tillman facing the field, looking as if he is leading the team out. On Sunday, April 15, 2005, 5,000 participants turned out for the inaugural Pat's Run, which has become the annual fundraising event for the Pat Tillman Foundation in Tempe. The racers traveled along the 4.2-mile course around Tempe Town Lake to the finish line on the 42-yard line of Sun Devil Stadium in order to commemorate the number which Tillman wore as the Sun Devil and which was later retired in his honor. A second race took place in San Jose. Sponsored by the Pat Tillman Foundation, Pat's Run has continued to grow every year with more than 28,000 attendees in April of 2019. Various honor runs in locations such as Austin, Texas, take place around the country at the same time as Pat's Run and are supported by Arizona State University's Alumni Association. In 2004, the NFL donated $250,000 to the United Service Organizations to build a USO Center in memory of Tillman. The Pat Tillman USO Center, the first USO Center in Afghanistan, opened on Bagram Air Base on April 1, 2005. As of 2019, the NFL continues to support the Pat Tillman Foundation through its Salute to Service campaign, honoring United States military service members along with other military and veteran nonprofits. The song Worldwide Suicide by Pearl Jam, released March 14, 2006, was written largely about Tillman. The Pac-10 Conference renamed its annual Defensive Player of the Year award in football to the Pat Tillman Defensive Player of the Year. Tillman's High School, Leland High School in San Jose, renamed its football field after him. The skateboarding bulldog featured on YouTube and in an iPhone commercial was named after Tillman. 2 books about Tillman were published in 2009. John Krakauer, author of Into Thin Air and Into the Wild, chronicles Tillman's story in Where Men Win Glory, The Odyssey of Pat Tillman, published by Doubleday on September 15th. Meanwhile, Tillman's mother, Mary Tillman, also wrote a book about her son, Boots on the Ground, by Dusk, which was released in April 2008. Following Tillman's death, Ohio State linebackers consisting of A.J. Hawk, Bobby Carpenter, and Anthony Schlegel, as well as center Nick Mangold, grew their hair in tribute, imitating Tillman's trademark locks. In September of 2008, Rory Fanning, a fellow Army Ranger who was stationed with Tillman in Fort Lewis, Washington, began his Walk for Pat, a walk across the United States in an effort to raise money and awareness for the Pat Tillman Foundation. The stated fundraising goal is $3.6 million, the value of the contract Tillman turned down when he decided to enlist in the military. The Arizona State University Sun Devils football team wore special uniforms made by Adidas to honor Tillman on his career on October 29, 2015, when they faced the Oregon Ducks. All proceeds from the uniforms went to the Pat Tillman Foundation. Super Bowl 57, which was played in Arizona, where he played collegiately and professionally, was dedicated to Tillman. 4 Tillman Foundation scholars performed the ceremonial coin toss. After a report of Tillman's anti-war views became public, Ted Rall, who had previously written a comic calling Tillman a fool and idiot, said that he was wrong to have assumed Tillman to be a right-wing poster child when Tillman regarded the invasion of Iraq as illegal. Then Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Koslerich, Regimental Executive Officer at Forward Operating Base Salerno, under which Tillman was serving at the time of his death, made statements about the Tillman family's search for truth based on Tillman's atheism. In comments on ESPN, Koslerich said, "These people have a hard time letting it go. It may be because of their religious beliefs, and when you die, I mean there is supposedly a better life, right? Well, if you're an atheist, then you don't believe in anything. If you die, what is there to go to? Nothing. You're a dirt worm. So for their son to die for nothing, and now he is no more, I do not know how an atheist thinks. I could only imagine that would be pretty tough." Koslerich conducted the second investigation into Tillman's death, which lasted a week, from May 8th to 15th, 2004. Brigadier General Rodney Johnson, the commanding general of the United States Army Criminal Investigations Command, testified before Congress that he found these statements totally unacceptable. Acting Department of Defense Inspector General Thomas Gimbel also testified that he was shocked that Lieutenant Colonel Koslerich would make these statements. According to AP analysis, 3 lower-level officers are expected to be punished, and Koslerich may be one of the 3. Tillman's mother continued to reject the Pentagon's characterization of the officers' offenses as errors in reporting Tillman's death, because several officers have said they made conscious decisions not to tell the Tillman family that friendly fire was suspected. So, closing thoughts. It is hard to see some of these facts put out and truly recognize how easy it is for the Army to try and cover something up. I mean, this is Pat Tillman. And knowing that with someone even as famous as this, even someone that the U.S. government, the U.S. military, knew there would be questions asked, knew there would be trying to find more research into it, that they so blatantly tried to cover it up. And I personally feel that the parents are right in this. The way the military handled this was terrible. And I do feel like they were trying to use Pat as their poster child for recruitment. Look at Pat Tillman, this football player who's well-known, well-liked, who's given up a current day $6 million contract to serve the military. I can't say anything because I can't say anything for certain because I wasn't there. I don't know what happened there. But when you have medical army doctors saying the facts just aren't lining up with what the story was told, military personnel congratulating each other for keeping it under wraps while people are trying to figure out what's going on, hiding it from the family of the deceased. And I'm pretty sure it's not in my notes, but I was pretty sure that they had released the information that Pat had been killed to the media before the family was notified, which, if I remember correctly, it was something that Bush himself had set up, was any death had to be reported to family at least 48 hours before anything was released to the media. And that wasn't just Pat Tillman. That wasn't just famous people's deaths. That was any death the family had to be notified first. It's gross. I don't know Pat personally. I don't normally, when celebrities pass away, whatever, I might feel some minor emotion, but I don't know these people personally. Pat Tillman, definitely, his story has a major impact on me, especially with just the blatant disregard for protocol, the feeling of being able to do whatever they feel like they wanted, the military feeling like they can handle it however they wanted to handle it and do it the way they wanted to. The government trying to use Pat Tillman's death or just trying to use Pat Tillman in general when he didn't want to be used as a media prop. Just something that his death being something to propel more patriotism. It's gross. Like I said, normally I don't have any feelings or connections like a super close, but I feel after learning more of Pat's story, how often is this happening where we don't have a major media eye on it? And it's easy to cover up. It's easy to just I feel like most of the podcasts I listened to kind of went back and forth on whether or not they felt his death was intentional. with the facts that are laid out here, it does make it feel more intentional. It does make it feel like more of a cover-up, a legitimate cover-up. And it was. I mean, we are aware that they tried to cover it up, make it seem like Pat died combating enemies until it was more looked into, and we discovered that no, it was not. It was fratricide. He died to friendly fire, and there was even evidence of enemy fire found at the scene. It doesn't sit right with me. But I encourage you, I'm sure there's even more information out there than what I shared today. Look into the story of Pat Tillman. I am very happy I was able to do this episode. So I want to make sure that occasionally I'm using my platform, as small as it may be, to share information like this, share people's stories that need to be shared. What I would like to end this podcast with, 2 years after Pat Tillman's death, his brother wrote an essay. I've shared a link to it in the show notes. But yeah, let's just go ahead and do this. It's Pat's birthday on November 6th, and elections are the day after. It gets me thinking about a conversation I had with Pat before we joined the military. He spoke about the risks with signing the papers. How once we committed, we were at the mercy of the American leadership and the American people. How we could be thrown in a direction not of our volition. How fighting as a soldier would leave us without a voice until we got out. Much has happened since we handed over our voice. Somehow, we were sent to invade a nation because it was a direct threat to the American people, or to the world, or harbored terrorists, or was involved in the September 11th attacks, or received weapons-grade uranium from Niger, or had mobile weapon labs, or WMD, or had a need to be liberated, or we needed to establish democracy, or stop an insurgency, or stop a civil war we created that can't be called a civil war even though it is. Something like that. Somehow, our elected leaders were subverting international law and humanity by setting up secret prisons around the world, secretly kidnapping people, secretly holding them indefinitely, secretly not charging them with anything, secretly torturing them. Somehow, that overt policy of torture became the fault of a few bad apples in the military. Somehow, back at home, support for the soldiers meant having a 5-year-old kindergartner scribble a picture with crayons and send it overseas, or slapping stickers on cars, or lobbying Congress for an extra pad and a helmet. It's interesting that a soldier on his 3rd or 4th tour should care about a drawing from a 5-year-old, or a faded sticker on a car as his friends die around him, or an extra pad and a helmet, as if it will protect him when an IED throws his vehicle 50 feet into the air as his body comes apart and his skin melts to the seat. Somehow, the more soldiers that die, the more legitimate the illegal invasion becomes. Somehow, those afraid to fight an illegal invasion decades ago are allowed to send soldiers to die for an illegal invasion they started. Somehow American leadership, whose only credit is lying to its people and illegally invading a nation, has been allowed to steal the courage, virtue, and honor of its soldiers on the ground. Somehow faking character, virtue, and strength is tolerated. Somehow profiting from tragedy and horror is tolerated. Somehow the death of tens, if not hundreds, of thousands of people is tolerated. Somehow subversion of the Bill of Rights and the Constitution is tolerated. Somehow suspension of habeas corpus is supposed to keep this country safe. Somehow torture is tolerated. Somehow lying is tolerated. Somehow reason is being discarded for faith, dogma, and nonsense. Somehow American leadership managed to create a more dangerous world. Somehow, a narrative is more important than reality. Somehow, America has become a country that projects everything that it is not and condemns everything that it is. Somehow, the most reasonable, trusted, and respected country in the world has become one of the most irrational, belligerent, feared, and distrusted countries in the world. Somehow, being politically informed, diligent, and skeptical has been replaced by apathy through active ignorance. Somehow, the same incompetent, narcissistic, virtuous, vacuous, malicious criminals are still in charge of this country. Somehow this is tolerated. Somehow nobody is accountable for this. In a democracy, the policy of the leaders is the policy of the people. So don't be shocked when our grandkids bury much of this generation as traitors to the nation, to the world, and to humanity. Most likely, they will come to know that somehow was nurtured by fear, insecurity, and indifference, leaving the country vulnerable to unchecked, unchallenged parasites. Luckily, this country is still a democracy. People still have a voice. People still can take action. It can start after Pat's birthday. Brother and friend of Pat Tillman, Kevin Tillman. That was released in 2006. And I feel like reading it today, almost 10 years later, that it is still an applicable essay. And one that more people, I think, need to hear. That is all I have on Pat Tillman. My hope is that you learned something new today, or that you just had a refresher on something that we may have forgotten about. The hardest part sometimes is speaking out about what you believe and what you feel. And I feel Pat did that. As I said at the beginning of the episode, I think Pat Tillman was what an American should be. Someone who speaks out when they see an injustice. The reality is we have our First Amendment right, but I feel like a lot of people don't feel that we have that right as much as we used to. Have conversations. When you see something that's unjust and wrong, don't be afraid to speak up about it. So I'll go ahead and sign off here. As always, thank you for listening. A quote from Mark Twain that I heard Conan O'Brien say when he was receiving his Mark Twain Prize for American Humor. Patriotism is supporting your country all the time and your government when it deserves it. See y'all next time.